I'm Tim Harfman, standing outside Columbia University where a professor's office was scrawled with messages of hate. I'll have the latest.
In a surprise move, President Trump canceled a planned summit with Vladimir Putin, the commander-in-chief blaming a high seas naval confrontation.
If they don't have the opportunity to be reconciled with God and they die in their sins, that they're going to hell, that's going to motivate you to do quite a bit.
American Missionary John Chau's friend explaining the motivation that sent the Christian into danger. Plus, Bishop DiMarzio will be here to talk about relations between the Vatican and American bishops in his weekly segment, Into the Deep. The news starts right now.
And I'm just totally shocked and horrified by this, especially in this institution.
A shocking scene in Manhattan, someone scrawling symbols of hate on the walls of an Ivy League campus. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. Tonight, Columbia University is reeling after a Jewish professor's office was spray painted with swastikas. Currents News' Tim Harfman is standing by at the Manhattan campus with the latest. Tim.
Liz, as the NYPD continues to investigate this hate crime, the mood around the institution is shock and disbelief. Students we spoke with said they'd never expect this to happen here.
I'm just totally shocked and horrified by this, especially in this institution. You know, we preach multiculturalism, we preach diversity.
The disbelief outside of Teachers College at Columbia University comes after vandalism. 2 large swastikas and an anti-Semitic slur spray painted on the walls of Professor Elizabeth Midlarski's office, who is Jewish. The graffiti discovered Wednesday just before noon.
It's really awful, and it makes me really sad that that's still happening today.
I spoke to my mother-in-law this morning, who's a Holocaust survivor and lives in Sweden, and she said, I can't believe what's happening in New York. It's like the 30s again, all over the world.
Students say there's tight security around campus. In order to access buildings, you must have proper identification.
You scan in, so everyone has their ID card either in their phone or something, and it comes up that the security officers will get to know who's a student, and they'll see right away if it doesn't scan. So
Teachers College at Columbia University released a statement, reading in part, "We unequivocally condemn any expression of hatred, which has no place in our society. We are outraged and horrified by this act of aggression and use of this vile anti-Semitic symbol against a valued member of our community. This comes at a time when attacks on the Jewish community are on the rise. As of this month, the NYPD says there have been nearly 160 reports in New York City. That's up 22% from 130 cases this time last year. That includes hateful graffiti at a Brooklyn synagogue earlier this month.
Contact, shots fired, shots fired.
There's been a spike across the country too, including 11 men and women killed when a gunman opened fire at Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh last month. Students say there must be peace.
This is horrific, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop not only for anti-Semitism, but for all groups.
The NYPD has not released surveillance videos or photos. Anyone with information is encouraged to call Crime Stoppers at 800-577-TIPS or text CRIMES to TIPS 577. On the Upper West Side, Tim Harfman, Currents News. Liz, back to you.
All right, Tim, thank you very much. Stay tuned. Rabbi Brad Hirschfield is the national leader of the Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership. He'll join us in a few moments to discuss rising anti-Semitism in America. President Trump has canceled a summit meeting with Vladimir Putin. They were together in Helsinki this summer, but Trump has called off a meeting with the Russians set for Saturday at the G20 summit in Argentina. The commander-in-chief said his decision is a response to Russia seizing 3 Ukrainian ships over the weekend. The move comes just hours after the president's longtime personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty to lying to Congress about Russia and Trump business interests. Omar Jimenez has the latest on this breaking story.
Michael Cohen, President Trump's former personal attorney, now admits he made false statements to Congress about the Russia investigation, specifically about a proposed Trump Tower project in Moscow and when exactly those discussions ended.
He's a weak person, and what he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence, so he's lying.
Court documents say Cohen attempted to conceal or minimize these facts, among others. Quote, The Moscow project was discussed multiple times within the company and did not end in January 2016. Instead, as late as approximately June 2016. That's after then-candidate Trump had become the presumed Republican nominee. Also, quote, Cohen agreed to travel to Russia in connection with the Moscow project and took steps in contemplation of individual one's possible travel to Russia. Individual one being Donald Trump.
I think there's more story to be told. If anything the president has said is true, that there's no there, why are all his closest associates being found guilty of lying about their ties to Russia?
And all of this comes a day after President Trump would not rule out a pardon for his former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, who's accused by Mueller's team of violating his plea agreement and lying to the special counsel. Meanwhile, Trump canceled his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the G20 summit in Argentina, citing ongoing tensions in Ukraine. But, of course, the move comes in the direct aftermath of Cohen's guilty plea. In Washington, Omar Jimenez, Currents News.
Tonight, Tijuana's mayor is saying his city faces a crisis because of that migrant caravan. Many are seriously ill, and the city can't care for them all. Leila Santiago is with the migrants.
Long lines form every single day, one for women and children, the other for men that are waiting here, some say for hours, just to get a small plate of food. Food, many telling me, is a very limited resource. The state tells me they spend $27,000 US just to feed this caravan. Let me actually show you exactly what they get. So esto es lo que le dieron ahí. It looks like a spaghetti and soup. Y esto para los dos. And this is what will feed this young child and this gentleman. Gracias, gracias. This is a family from Honduras who I actually met earlier, saying that they are fleeing violence to hopefully, for them, get asylum in the United States. That is their goal. But I also want to walk over here to sort of show you what it's like. A lot of people crowding outside, and this is outside the shelter. So you can see, again, many of them here because it's time for a meal, but also down over here they actually have some tents that have been set up, many of them using plastic right now to put some tarps over because there is a concern that there could be rain in the next 24 hours, and those tarps may cover them from above, but that does not provide any sort of relief from any water that may get on the ground. I spoke to a volunteer with one of 3 medical teams out here. He says they're seeing more than 150 people a day, many with respiratory infections. Lice is an issue, as well as stomach issues. So how long these migrants will be willing to stay under these conditions for what many call a dream, a hope of a better life, we'll just have to wait and see.
The U.S. may now keep troops at the border until late January. The mission had been scheduled to end December 15th. As the Tijuana refugee camp swells, the Bishop of Laredo, Texas, James Tamayo, is urging church leaders and lay faithful to show compassion to any of the caravan migrants who need help. Laredo borders Mexico, and Bishop Tamayo has met with U.S. officials to explain the church's position on immigration, specifically that newcomers should be treated with dignity. Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio joins us now for this week's Into the Deep segment. He discusses relations between the Vatican and U.S. bishops with Ed Wilkinson after the recent bishops' meeting. Ed.
Thanks, Liz. Bishop DiMarzio is here today. We're going to go back a couple of weeks with him and talk about a recent bishops' meeting in Baltimore. Bishop, that meeting got off to a little bit of a rocky start because the news came out that the Vatican did not want the bishops to move ahead on sexual abuse guidelines or to do anything new. What happened
well,
there?
the proposals we had were basically to ensure that any accusation against a bishop would be heard and acted upon. But they were really not ripe, say, to be voted on. So I think they did us a big favor by saying wait until they have the meeting in February where all the bishops' conference of the world come together. Maybe they could do something that would be universal. But as far as the 4 proposals they had, one could have passed, but the other 3 really need a lot more work. Mm-hmm. So I was not disappointed. Unfortunately, again, the way it is portrayed is that we're being stopped from doing more about sexual abuse. That's not true. As far as I'm concerned, any bishop, and not I'm concerned, I know that any bishop who has been accused since 2002 has been taken out of service, if this has been proven. So, I mean, it's an extra safeguard, and it's a way that could work, having an outside line. People can call an investigatory body, but the issues are rather complex and were not really ironed out.
Yeah. Would these also apply to bishops, say, who not accused themselves personally, but may have mishandled?
That's right, even a mishandling of a case. Now, that's not so easy to do. Since 2002, we had rather clear guidelines, but before 2002, there really were no clear guidelines on how to handle these cases, so everybody was on their own to figure out what's the best they could do. So, you know, again, we can't go back too far because there were no guidelines.
There were suggestions that a panel should be set up, have lay people involved to supervise the bishops on these things. Do you think the Vatican was a little skittish about having the lay people involved?
I don't know if that was a problem. We have the other, every diocese has their own review board. It's not a question of judging the bishops, it's a question of judging the information and the accusation itself. So it's a different thing. You're looking at the evidence. But the problem is, the main problem was they did not distinguish between things that were within the statute of limitations or those that were beyond. You cannot investigate anything that's within the statute of limitations. If it happened within the statute of limitations, every state is different. We have no right to do that because that should go directly to law enforcement. And that distinction was not made. It was maybe presumed, but it wasn't there. So that could create a big problem. Anything beyond the statute of limitations that happened, again, a long time ago, then need to investigate it, to give some information to the Holy See through the nuncio would be in order. But anything that was in real time, you would say, should not be investigated by anyone except law enforcement.
So there's going to be a meeting at the Vatican in February with representatives of the world's bishops. And what do you expect to come out of that?
I don't know. There was no agenda put forward. I mean, they're looking at the issue of sexual abuse in the whole church. What is the best things that could be done? I think the U.S. Church is a model. Our charter of 2002 has shown that it does work. With the prevention and with the guidelines we have, I think we've all but extinguished sexual abuse. So I think that's a great model that could be proposed.
Liz, that's the bishop's update on what happened to the bishops in Baltimore. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Ed. And thank you, Bishop DiMarzio, for that important update. There's a lot more news headed your way. Hoping to evangelize an isolated tribe, an American missionary lost his life. His friend will be here to tell us what motivated John Chau. The Chinese government is cracking down on the scientist who claimed he could change the DNA of babies. And an important programming note to share with you. Currents News will be moving to new time slots. Starting Monday, December 3rd, the news will air a half hour earlier at 7 p.m. right here on net. Reruns will air at 10 p.m. and then the next morning again at 7:30 a.m. We'll be right back. Tonight, humanitarian aid for Christians and Yazidis facing genocide is on President Trump's desk, awaiting his signature. The relief would go to religious minorities who were persecuted by ISIS and others, and it would assist with rebuilding the Christian and Yazidi communities in Iraq and Syria. The measure passed Congress unanimously, and the White House had said the president supports it. An update tonight on the American Christian missionary who wanted to evangelize a tribe living on a remote island off the coast of India. 26-year-old John Allen Chau recently traveled to Sentinel Island in the Bay of Bengal. By all accounts, the Sentinelese killed him. They have resisted contact with the outside world, sometimes violently. Intrusion by foreigners is prevented out of fear of spreading communicable diseases. Chau was on a mission to spread the gospel of Christ. John Middleton Ramsey worked with John Chau, and he joins us now from Oslo, Norway. John, thank you so much for being here with us. John, you too are a Christian missionary. You worked together with John in Israel, and you still have hope tonight that your friend is alive. Please tell us why.
Sure. I don't think there's a large chance that he's alive, but his body hasn't been recovered yet, and there haven't been a lot of witnesses, basically only the fisherman that witnessed his murder, so I wouldn't rule out the possibility that he's still alive.
John, help us
albeit the
understand.
chances are.
Help us understand, John, why was your friend so motivated to try to evangelize the people on Sentinel Island?
Sure, he was motivated to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to the least reached corners of the world, and this was arguably one of the most remote groups of people there is in the world, and that's what attracted him. He also had a spirit of adventure, for sure.
And you say you share the same beliefs, so I'm sure you had a conversation about this. What did he say to you before he made the trip? How long was he even planning it?
I don't know for sure how long. He told me his plans 2 years in advance. Back in 2016, he made a scouting trip to the Andamans just to get to know the area, and he told me all about that.
John, you say that you try to explain this to people and they simply just don't understand what it was about this trip and why he would actually pursue it because of the dangers. What do you say to people that say that to you?
I try to explain to them, even if they don't share the faith, just try to help them to understand what the faith is. You know, if you believe that you're going to heaven after you die, and if you believe these other people, if they don't have the opportunity to be reconciled with God and they die in their sins, that they're going to hell, that's going to motivate you to do quite a bit. And that's what motivated John, for sure.
We have 30 seconds, John. What do you want people to know about your friend?
He was a down-to-earth, chill kind of guy. Humble, what you see is what you get. And he was kind of everyone's favorite person. Popular guy, but unpretentious. And I hope he'll be a statement to the world that this is a faith worth being passionate for and worth dying for if necessary.
All right, John, I'm afraid that has to be the final word. Our prayers are with you, your friends, and your family. I thank you so much for making the time to talk with us.
It's appreciated. Thank you now.
The Chinese scientist who claims he created the world's first genetically edited babies has to shut down his operation. Chinese government officials have halted his gene editing activities, saying the research violates Chinese law. The scientist recently spoke about how proud he was of altering the genes of twin girls so they could not contract HIV. Gene editing is banned in most countries. Still to come on Currents News, Rabbi Brad Hirschfield, the national leader of the Jewish Learning and Leadership Center, will be here to discuss the rise of anti-Semitism in America and the story of two nuns who mistook a man as a good Samaritan, the positive ending to the story. And do you have a story idea, something happening in your parish we should know about? We want to hear from you. Keep this email handy, newstips@thesalesmedia.org. We'll be right back. Rabbi Brad Hirschfield is the president of the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership. For 3 years in a row, he has been credited by Newsweek magazine as one of America's 50 most influential rabbis. And he joins us now to talk about the rise of anti-Semitic attacks here in the U.S. Rabbi, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a difficult topic, obviously.
It is indeed.
We recently witnessed what experts call the worst attack on Jews in U.S. history. New statistics are out now showing that the FBI has data that shows a 37% spike in anti-Semitic attacks in the U.S. You have a very compelling perspective on both. Share that with us.
Yeah, by the way, it's not just what experts have called the worst attack. It is the worst attack. 11 people murdered simply because they were Jewish. That's unprecedented in American history. And so that's pretty profound, and nothing will change that. It's horrible. It's indescribably horrible. The rise in anti-Semitism is incredibly disturbing, and anyone who suggests otherwise or attempts to minimize it is actually participating in something that's evil. We need people who will come at real challenges with a sense of hope and gratitude for all that is right, and people who know that much more is right then is wrong, not to shy away from the stuff that really is broken.
What is keeping us from actually understanding, hearing, and acknowledging that part of the narrative? Would you say that it's attributed to a rise in political rhetoric, or what could it possibly be?
So it's very hard to love something, warts and all. Right? Forget about the country. Just the person we're with at the end of the day, our children, our parents when they annoy us or they age. I think it's very hard to say, I love you, whether it's to another person or to this magnificent nation of ours, and in the same breath that because I love you, I can also say it's not perfect. And I think people haven't been trained to do that. Most people have been told that, you know, there's that line in that cheesy book and movie, love story, love means never having to say you're sorry. I beg to differ.
So you speak.
Love means being able to say I'm sorry and know that we will be there for one another in the midst of what's broken. And that is what we need. Things are broken. They need to be fixed, but not because we don't love this culture and this country. I love this country, but something is problematic. And you ask about the language. Yes, language is a problem. Can I draw a straight line of connection between hate speech and violence? No, I can't.
You're able to, Rabbi, find a positive, optimistic aspect of these issues, these circumstances. What can we learn then from these acts of hate? Because these stories, they tend to fade from the headlines, right? They go further and further down as the weeks go by. So how do we keep the conversation going?
So the first thing is, as people of faith, we have to be optimistic. I'm always surprised when people of faith are pessimists. How can we be pessimists?
You can't have both, right? You can't
have faith. To
have
be a person of faith is to believe that life will win, that love will win. So we have to believe that. How do you stay in that moment and keep it going? Spend as much time, every person would spend as much time not bemoaning what is wrong, but asking, not what someone else can do, but what can each of us do to make things safer for whomever we believe is most vulnerable.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you.
I could talk with you forever. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Well, it's the most wonderful time of the year until you're duped by an unholy act. These two little sisters of the poor purchased gifts from Costco for some elderly and hospice patients. Now, a man masquerading as a good Samaritan offered to help load the packages into the trunk of their car. The grateful sisters bestowed a blessing for the kindness. When they got home, they found out that that good guy was a Grinch who stole their Christmas. All seemed lost until a call from Costco.
We found your cart way out in the parking lot, abandoned. And we're like, really?
Yes, really, found with the packages inside. Still no official explanation why the cold-blooded crook changed his mind, but some believe even the hardest of hearts are softened by thankful nuns. Ah, 'tis the season. That is Currents News. I'm Liz Faublas. Just a reminder that Currents News is moving to a new time slot. Starting Monday, December 3rd, the news will air at 7 p.m. As always, thank you for joining us because we're putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.